Well, good day, everybody. Pastor Tim Carscadden here, Christian Center Shreveport, doing our pipeline report here on Monday. It is the 14th day of April, 2025. As we come to you each Monday, myself, most of the time, with my son Zachary, who is in the other office right on the other side of this wall. We're filming from our offices here at the campus here at Christian Center Shreveport. So thankful for you guys that partner with us and sow into our ministry. Watch us on live streams. It's such a blessing. The feedback you give us is amazing. And I do want to say that, like when we're putting your chats in here right now, whether you're on the Facebook page, on the YouTube page or Rumble page, we do get to see those. And thank you again, always, for putting in that little timeline there where you're from. It gives us a passion to pray for your state and your nation, whatever area you're from, as you push into praying for America. That's what this ministry is about, the Pipeline Report. We try to bring you the vetted news that we think is important prophetically, what God is saying for our nation, and then how to partner in prayer as well as participation. It's more than just prayer. We're asking our followers to be engaged. Talk to their congressmen, talk to their senators, talk to their local officials, pray for them, build them up, go to events that actually affect our nation. We do all those things here from where we are, and we want you to do that as well for our family here in Louisiana. We thank you, and the surrounding area. Thank you for partnering with us. Yesterday, I did my message on Passover as we were in the Passover feast, which we are this week as well. It's a 7-day feast. If you listen to my daily podcast, we're talking about the feast this week and what prophetically it means for us right now and what the Lord's doing in the earth through that revelation. And so we thank you for partnering with us. It's a very serious time. I'm going to play a video here in just a minute from Chuck Pierce, who gave it this weekend at his Passover conference, which I think was a very important word for all of us. But it gave us a timeline. That's why we titled today 50 Days of Visitation. And you know, the enemy being very active. I don't want to call it chaos. It could be what the enemy's planned for the next 50 days, which is part of what we call the counting of the Omer. It's in Leviticus, where it talks about this time where between Passover and Pentecost, where they're commissioned by the Lord to count the Omer, which is the measuring of the grain, because something was going to shift in 50 days. In the Old Testament, the giving of the law after 50 days. In the New Testament, the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. So it is a very important, critical time when we look at it that way. And I want to break down his word because I've been following Chuck for many years, and it's very important that you understand how he gives prophetic words and how to interpret them. I think I'll talk about that in just a minute. So let's get to his word here that he gave. He gave it on, I'm not sure what day it was in the feast that he gave it, but let me play it and let's listen to what God's saying through this message, what God spoke to Chuck.
After 10 days of the Lord waking me up at 2 a.m. and not allowing me to go back to sleep, finally on the 10th day, I said, Lord, why are you waking me up? He said, I am waking you up so you wake up. And it was as if, since that time, when he said that last Friday, I am awake. And my eyes are open to things I couldn't see. And what I want to say to you is, April the 12th through June the 1st, that starts tomorrow, becomes the key turning redemptive time for us to see great manifestations of God moving forward, but know the enemy has many plans. And the Lord showed me this 30 days of intensity between April the 20th and May the 20th, and he said, my people I am calling to stand in the midst of that intensity, and I will come down and start visiting in ways I have not visited America. And then he said, and I will show you, and I'll send something out starting on April 13th. I will show you how to really count the Omer this year. That begins April the 13th through June the 1st. Now, why am I saying this? I don't want us to not know at this Passover that we are being called into an intense walk. And the Lord is saying to each one of us, stay the course during this time. Stay the course during this time. Don't deviate to the right. Don't go off to the left. Don't chase after this and don't chase after that. Stay the course. Because if you stay the course, I will have a new beachhead formed by June the 2nd in this nation. The Lord said, ask me for the beachhead now. What is a beachhead? That's a place where the army finds its footing, and even though they're worn down from the battle, they can't be pushed back again. I want you to say, I want my beachhead by June 2nd. I want it personally. I want it corporately. I want it territorially. And I want it for the generations that's coming behind me. The Lord says, I have you on a redemptive path this year. Get ready.
Let's agree with that word. We're going to make it. Now, that's a lot in one word. And sometimes people who follow Chuck, which I spoke for him and he spoke in our house here. So we have that relationship. You must understand how his words work. I don't want to say he's not being forthright. He is very forthright with what he's saying, but his words are, I don't want to use the word cryptic. There's riddles in there that you have to interpret. So we have revelation, interpretation, and then we have the application. So the revelation here is that God showed him this, and one thing that Apostle Chuck has said before is he just says what he hears and what he sees. He doesn't always fully understand it. I remember once when he gave the word about Saddam Hussein to Dutch with Dutch sheets, and we talked about it on here before. He said that within, I think, 2 weeks they were going to find him in a hole. Is basically what they said, and he couldn't believe he said it. And he went up to Dutch and said, "You better clean that up." And so Chuck, Dutch said, "What am I supposed to do?" But here's what he saw. He saw Saddam Hussein, the leader of Iraq at that time, in a hole, and he saw him recovered. Okay. He didn't know what that meant, but he just said what he saw. Well, several weeks later, just like the prophecy said, they were up in, I think it was northern Iraq, and they were, our forces were up there, and they found a underground tunnel or whatever, some type of protection, and they lifted the lid, and there was Saddam Hussein. He was in a hole. Came past, just like now. Most people, when they listen to you're gonna find him in a hole 2 weeks from now, they're like, "Really? That's the stupidest word I've ever heard." And Bob Jones used to have that same accusation against him because he gave words like that as well. And you have to listen with the ears of the Spirit. He came to Louisiana one time years ago. I was at the meeting. Winds are going to come, winds of change, and I saw the waves of God hitting your shores and just coming up. It'll be a major movement in your state, and And he gives this whole word, and everybody, he prays God. God's Holy Spirit's coming to Louisiana. And in the exact time frame he gave, we had a major hurricane come. That wasn't Katrina. That was one later. I think it was Rita. And the waves came and the wind blew just like he said it would. We took it for the spiritual, which it was as well, but we missed the preparation for the natural. We have to understand how prophets work and apostles work. and when they did it. So now he gave a couple timelines in there. One from April 20 to May 20, which is signs, wonders, and miracles. So you pray into that. That one was easy to interpret. Have an expectation that in that 1 month period you're going to see that. We're believing that for America because most of his word was concerning the nation. When he talked about that, there wasn't. Although the nations can take some of that, the main word was for the nation of America. Then he said um, that we need to get a beachhead settled by June the 2nd. Okay, now, yes, a beachhead. That means that we're going to have a place of authority. We take in territory, and therefore we can fight from there. I mean, that's what it means, basically. So I looked up Lord, give me a. I mean, I just looked up YouTube and said, what's a beachhead look like when it's being taken? Here's a quick picture of what it looks like when they're taking a beachhead. It's sad. It's scary. Now they look at these men. They're taking the beach. This is D-Day in Normandy. The enemy's just not going to sit there and allow this to happen without an attack. And so we see this happening here as they take the beachhead. Now that's what it means to take a beachhead. So, we gotta understand there's a cost, and he said that in his prophetic word that the enemy is going to have a strategy as well. Now, we don't fight against flesh and blood anymore. Thank God. We're not taking guns and doing that, but we are in spiritual warfare. So we have a 50-day framework here of taking territory that is very important for us to take and establish a beachhead, which means you can't just sit here with your arms crossed and say, well, be glad when June 2nd gets here, then we'll have our beachhead. Nope. This is a prophetic word that requires participation. Part of it's you're watching right here. Part of it is that we pray accordingly. We lift up our voices before the Lord and we pray accordingly. But then also if we need to take actions, sowing, first fruits, giving our best the whole 50 days and have an expectancy that as we go forward. Now, remember, the soldier doesn't know always what it's going to look like. The Lord will engage us and tell us, get in your ships, get in your vehicles, get in your ministries, and go for this and go for that. Just like the soldiers that were on those ships that took the beachhead that day, they were told a little bit that they were going to go to war, but they weren't fully informed of what it was going to look like when the enemy would unload on them, and many had died even in the boats and before they even made it to the shore. I'm believing that nobody gets taken out. I believe that's my prayer for that. But I'm going to pray also that God would give us grace in this hour to move forward. Okay, so that's a big thing that's happening right now. So with this 50 days of visitation, the Lord's going to visit us, but also it's going to be a time where we're going to be in great warfare. So do not be surprised at the level of warfare that we're going through. And as you're going through it, and I will be going through it with you, remind yourself this is to establish a beachhead. Personally, for the kingdom and for the nation. We're fighting for something that's great. President Trump, the administration, our Congress, our court systems, all the things that we've been talking about on these pipelines is all in the stream right now. It's in the mainstream. What's happening here? The Israel issue is huge right now because of the Prince of Persia is very active right now. I want to say this about the negotiations that are going on or went on in Omar this weekend with Witkoff, Trump's representative, and the Iranians. Direct contact, direct relations, direct talks, I should say, which is very unusual because Iran usually uses a mediator. And Trump said, no, we're going to talk to you directly. And which happened. But there is a danger here. They are master manipulators. They are master negotiators. Uh, I was in, I lobbied for years and years on the sanctions over Iran and the Iran nuclear deal. Iran never kept any of its promises concerning that deal. It manipulated every statute of those negotiations, and we were duped time and time again. We When President Trump was in 2016, we almost collapsed Iran, but then Biden restored him, gave their money back, and gave them the power back. So again, we had an administration in America, which we repent for, that participated with the Prince of Persia to grow. These are Persians. They're brilliant people. They are not ignorant. They have some of the best scientists in the world. The word Aryan comes from Iran. And so when Hitler would talk about the Aryan people who had the power, that would have come from the Iran base. So this is who they are. And right now they didn't, what we were told was they didn't want Rubio to negotiate this deal because Rubio has been public about his stance with Israel. Everything the Prince of Persia does through Iran, the government, the tyrannical government, is to thwart Israel's growth and prosperity and existence. So Rubio has made it very clear he's a pro-Israel person. Witkoff, a Jewish person. Many times the Jewish people are willing to negotiate. They're not always pro-Zionist like you and I are. So we have that battle going on as well. So we'll talk about that now. We'll get into the Israel. You want to speak about that, Zach, before we get into the Gaza deal?
Yeah, before we move on from Iran, let's not remember that what Iran was saying at the time when they were trying to make the Iran nuclear deal is that the nuclear facilities were not for weapons, it was not for defense, it was all for civilization purposes, and to be able to build nuclear facilities for energy, etc., stuff like this. And now all of a sudden they're flipping their tune, which I think everybody already knew. But the reality is they're now saying, well, we want these facilities now to protect ourselves. We need to be able to have nuclear weapons because Israel has them. And the part of the negotiation that we're seeing here is Iran's asking again, well, if you're going to take out our defense nuclear facilities that are in the mountains, hard to get to, just please leave the civilian ones where we can have energy again. Well, that kind of leaves a door open again. We've been down this road before. So it's the question, and this is, I forget the term, but it's a question that the Islamic world plays is when they're in a time of weakness, they negotiate, they ask for times of power, and then or try to gain munitions. And when they have those munitions, they go out and attack. There's a specific Arabic term that I can't remember, but that's the game they're playing right now. And you're seeing it. They know they're at a time of weakness. Their munitions are down. They're being attacked, and they're trying to get to a point where they can get their own beachhead, which I think is quite interesting here. And so is that we have to figure out, okay, what are we going to allow? Where's our beachhead going to be? And I think things are still kind of playing out with the Iran deal, because what's being, we talked about it last week, and we can kind of get into a lot of it now if we want to, is the aircraft carriers that are being brought to the region from the U.S. They're only increasing. They're increasing their attacks on the Yemenis, the Houthis there, who are then obviously an arm of Iran. And then also now there's weapons being distributed to Iranian proxies in Iran, trying to make their way to Lebanon and Syria, et cetera, stuff like that. Hezbollah's kind of in an uproar with what's going on in Lebanon. So there's a lot at play here. And I think it's interesting. Chuck would say what he said, hearing from the Lord. I mean, this is who he is, times and seasons of Issachar, sons of Issachar, being a watchman on the wall and understanding what's happening. So I think we have to go off the history here of Chuck and understanding, okay, when Chuck says these things, we kind of need to dig in a little bit and seek the Lord for, to search out a matter here from what Chuck's saying.
So we can expect that, and especially with Israel, we can expect that right now. There was rockets yesterday from Yemen. My friend Pastor Richard was in Israel. They were in bomb shelters. He told me what was going on there. So that pressure's on. We know we're bombing Yemen right now, daily, often, trying to dismantle them. There is a movement in Yemen among the Yemenis to overthrow the Houthis. And I think that's what America would like to see. They never admit that, but they'd like to see a regime change there. Sometimes regime changes, you never know how good it's going to be. So they're very they're very tenuous and when they move forward with this, because sometimes the replacement can be worse than what is already there, or they don't have the ability to maintain. We saw that with when the Taliban was overthrown. We established a government in Afghanistan, but it was all based on us protecting them and building them and maintaining them. So you need a government, an overthrow, if you want to call it that way, of people that can maintain once they overthrow a bad government, terrorist government. They're not a government, they're terrorists. But if you were to see that, and America's not saying that, that's me. So I just feel like that's probably what's going to be behind the scenes now. As they bomb, one of the things they're saying is because of the Gaza battle, and let me say this, uh, people aren't talking about this. I think because everybody's sick of Gaza and Hamas and all. Israel is starting to take territory. I'm not talking about just maintaining military presence. They're occupying. I used to hate the word occupying, but they have a presence in about 30% of Gaza right now. And if Hamas is not careful, they're going to lose even more territory. I don't know how that's going to play out long run. I just know that that's what's going on right now. Yesterday, Hamas, Jerusalem Post has reported that Hamas is saying that they're going to release 9 hostages. There's been pressure on them to release more. And so, Zach, why don't you talk about the JNS report about what's going on with the Gaza treatment? I mean, the deal with the Gaza release of the hostages there that America's playing a role in.
Yeah, we're seeing it's coming out that Trump is saying we're getting close to a Gaza hostage deal, and where Trump is saying and his party saying that they know there's 59 hostages still left. They believe, based on reports from Israel and the families that are there, that there's only 24 left alive. So they're trying to that variation there. They're trying to get the bodies back for the families. The families want the bodies. But then also there's pressure from the White House and the Trump administration to basically let Israel have its say. Now, this is coming off the heels of Trump, telling Hamas that, if you don't give up the hostages, we're going to come after you. So it's a little game of chicken here. Trump's and the administration are going to have to take the reins off and let Israel do what they do if he really wants things to go the way he wants them to go. Because anybody who knows anything about the Middle East, and this goes back to American involvement in Afghanistan, the belief there is Hamas will not quit until the last blood is shed, and because they know as long as there is a heartbeat, whether it's one person left in Hamas or 5,000, 10,000, it doesn't matter. They're going to continue to survive because it's more of a ideological spirit, what we would call a spiritual battle than anything. And so they're trying to just survive, whereas Israel's trying to wipe them off the face of the earth because Hamas is trying to wipe the Jews off the face of the earth. And part of the Islamic world, not just Arabic world. A lot of the Arabs there are innocent, and even some of the Arabs who would consider themselves Palestinians don't want to be there. They're asking for the border in Egypt to be open. They're asking for the border in Jordan and Syria to be open, but it's not. There's reports late last week, of Indonesia getting prepared to be able to take in upwards of 1,000 civilians, quote unquote. How they'll vet that is yet to be determined. I think that's kind of what Indonesia is wanting to verify and make sure of. And then you also have where do the rest, couple million plus people go if they're going to start deporting people. And then how do you verify that they're not a part of Hamas and then do the same thing? This is why Egypt doesn't want them. They put their military there because when they come, they start civil wars. Jordan, Syria, etc. These countries who are Islamic and more Arabic leaning, they don't want these people for various reasons. And so you're seeing these things play out. Trump and the administration are trying to put pressure on them. But at the end of the day is you kind of have the world leaders. And then if you're seeing this on different levels of different things in the United States, you still have military leaders and judges, et cetera, all this stuff who are preventing the administration from being able to walk out, its agenda, but then also more so to be able to walk out and uphold laws that America has voted in congressionally. So there's a lot at play here. And I don't know, we kind of talked about this. This can kind of come into this is the delays. Sometimes when there's a delay in these situations, it's because they want to make sure things are done properly. And in this case is, look, these are people's lives are at stake. They're trying to figure out where these hostages are, even the ones who are still alive. But Israel is having a more aggressive arm on the ground, and they're wiping out. There was a report I read the other day where one of the terrorists from Hamas who led one of the hostages out on stage, he ended up being wiped out. So they're getting closer and closer. They're dwindling down the ranks and the numbers of Hamas in Gaza because the hands are off. The handcuffs are off from America and the world because Trump is saying go in, and it takes time, it takes precision. One, because they have to be careful block by block, inch by inch where they go in, because what you're also seeing is they're sending women and children up to the gates and the borders where they have set up non-military zones where people shouldn't be, just to test them out to know how far they're going to let somebody get to said fence, get close to the military, because and they'll send 4 and 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, innocent children strapped with bombs or whatever the case may be with weapons. And so Israel, the IDF has to decide, do we take out this innocent child or who has a bomb strapped to him or weapons on them, or do we just try to push them back, tell them and yell at them to go back? Because the child is either going to die if he goes forward or die if he goes backwards. And so it's just a horrible position for these innocent people within Gaza. And I think we have to remember that. But also know that, what is being claimed as innocent are the people who went in and had attacked Israel on October 7th. That's something that can't be missed. You can't step over the dead bodies that happened on October 7th. And unfortunately, the world is doing that.
And here's Trump's statement about the hostages.
There's 59 hostages, but only 24 of them are living. And that's the way it's been presented to me by the mothers of some of the dead, mothers and fathers of some of the dead hostages. And they want the bodies of their baby, as they say, their baby, their young boys. They want them back as much as if they were alive. It's amazing, because when I met the hostages 2 weeks ago here, I couldn't believe what they had to go through, by the way. But when I met them, they said, yeah, there's 59, but 24 are living. And they actually consider, I guess if you're a parent, you do consider it this way, that the remainder who are dead, the 24 that are alive, the remainder that are dead, they want them back just as much as they would want them back if they were alive. It's really pretty amazing and pretty sad. So we're getting close to getting them back. We have a lot came back. A lot of people are very grateful. Some came back in pretty bad shape. Some came back, they're okay. I think they're going to be scarred mentally for a long time, because if you sit down and talk to them, as I have, what they went through is incredible. But we're making progress. We're dealing with Israel. We're dealing with Hamas. And it's...
So there you get the statement from the president, and I grieve when I hear those numbers. That and we've always felt that all along, unfortunately. And you don't ever want to discourage the families in the hopes that their children are alive, but this is the reality. And there's a lot of splintering of these hostages, Hamas, but there's also other groups that oversee them. So it's not just it's the jihad, it's others. And so there's not a central command that's dictating how the hostages are treated and where they're being taken care of. So one group, you may kill them. It is possible that in some of the explosions that some of them could have died in that. We don't know. But the intelligence that Israel has is incredible. They've not been wrong on their intelligence. So these numbers, I probably think, are very accurate as far as that's concerned. And here's the problem. You got, without those hostages, Hamas knows that Israel will have a free hand to do whatever it needs to do completely. So they're not going to want to surrender them. They're going to try to drag this out as long as they can. So this 9 is a good start, but as I know originally America and Israel wanted 10. We'll see how that plays out in the days ahead. But we do pray for this. This is part of the warfare. of establishing a beachhead. So let's believe by June 2nd that this could be the end of this, and that we could actually have all the hostages back, and there could be a whole thing. I think the whole plan was originally, what I was told through my briefings, was that they would get all the hostages back. Hamas would be given liberty to leave, the leadership, at least those who are still alive. Most of them are dead, but and they would go put them in another country, Africa. There's other countries they've talked about taking them to, and then put in an international security force within Gaza, an Arabic one from UAE or something like that. That was the original plan. And then, of course, then President Trump came out with, "Hey, let's just send them all out and rebuild and reestablish Gaza." If you look at it, it's worse than World War II war zone. I mean, I don't know how they're living. It's just third world upon third world type poverty. Just always having to go to somewhere to get water every day, to go for sanitation, all those. It's just not livable. So that
In
has
certain
to,
spots,
yeah,
it hasn't
yeah.
been touched.
That's right. That's right. You're right. They have avoided some of the bigger areas where the commerce is thriving, and they're doing well there, which the world doesn't want you to know about, but they are doing that as well. So this is a strategy for the next 50 days. Let's push into that as well, as we go after that. Okay, you got anything else on that, Zach?
No, we covered it.
Okay, let's cover that. Let's move on. Let's talk about one other topic I want to talk about is the tariffs that we talked about last week. Is still the topic in the world because of the markets that went up and down. Eventually, did very well. If you're a strategist, you can read what's about to happen here, and what's going to be tariffed and what's not going to be tariffed, et cetera, and make wise investments. You can do that. Now, I'll say this for electronics. He did put a stay on electronics, smartphones, computers, stuff like that. But now the semiconductor and the chips and all those things are potential tariffs. Apple is ramping up its production in India and Vietnam and other countries, trying to get as many products in hand. China now has threatened to withhold precious metals, which are used to make all these products. If you need a computer or you need an electronic device, I'd encourage you probably get it now before any of this stuff comes down. That's just my personal counsel. I haven't any prophetic on that, but I would say that that's probably a wise decision to do right now. But as we move forward in this tariff issue, we understand that one of the things that President Trump has said, and I was watching, I couldn't find the video I watched of some liberal pundits who were shocked that it's potential of President Trump with all these tariffs and this money coming in. The amount of money that's coming in is going to be so up to, I think it was 750 billion potential this year would come in this year. That was the numbers these liberal pundits were talking about. The numbers are anywhere from 250 to 750. But if it reaches the 750 number, on top of the Doge issues, which is saving the money as we're saving there, President Trump has proposed that if you make 150,000 or less, you have no federal taxes to pay. And these liberal pundits, their heads were about to explode because they said, look, if that happens 2026 mid-year, midterms, and 2028, it's over. The Republicans will walk away with a victory because the people will have the main thing in their life settled, which is their finances, and not having to pay taxes is just mind blowing to think about that. Now, many people don't pay taxes anyway because of all the tax credits, the child tax credits, et cetera, et cetera. They don't pay federal taxes because of that, and I think it's good because the government takes care of those who really, trying to build something for our nation. But Zach has something from a guy named Federer, who I think is really good guy to follow. You give the link to that, Zach, so people can read his stuff. But he has some history on the tariffs and how much money it's brought in the past. Go ahead and speak into that.
Yeah, it's the American Minute with Bill Federer. And I want to get to the historical aspect, but on the now battle, things have kind of centered in on 3 points. Is we have to understand this is what this is all about: is borrow or slave to the lender. And The Chinese not only hold U.S. government debts, but they also hold a lot of foreign debts around the world. And in some instances, they own the country's imports more specifically in their new Silk Road agenda, which is they're trying to get at. And so that's kind of the thing. So what they want to do is they want you to become dependent upon China. They want to start influencing your political agenda so they can economically build up themselves. Whether they'll go to war or not is still to be determined. When they have gone in simple conflicts, whether it be with India and the surrounding countries, they just get destroyed. And we're talking about not the most strategic military countries in the world that are just wiping them off the face of the earth when they get into conflicts with them. So there's an understanding there, kind of a paper tiger there is what is believed. And then you also have the 125% tariffs now that Trump has put on. Kevin O'Leary, you probably heard the comments. Kevin O'Leary said he needs to go up to 400%. In my understanding of actual businesses that are dealing with China, it probably needs to go even higher, just for the sense, for the purpose of the Chinese. Not only do they lower their wages for their own employees and their workers, but they're stealing, intellectual data, all these things, copyright laws they don't care about. They copy it just to build themselves up, and then their government subsidizes their companies when they build and manufacture in country. And their people are willing to work for low, if anything, wages, which a free trade capitalist would say is a good thing. But there's a debate there. We don't want to have time to get in that today. But then also you're seeing, and I think this is a good thing, and a lot of people are in agreement, even your free trade libertarians, ultra capitalists, they're saying, this needed to happen finally, where Trump has centered all his tariffs around China. And that's the war kind of easing on, the rest of the countries. And I would agree that's a positive thing. Now, the question is, because China knows they can influence countries, borrow, slave, or lend, or they understand that principle, it's a kingdom principle they're perverting it. Will they then start influencing these countries to then start attacking the United States? So there's the now front. And in the historical front, I want to bring up 3 key points here, where it actually goes back to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, where it talks about the government, the role of the government is to collect duties and imposts, which are to help, quote unquote, pay the debts and provide for common defense and general welfare of the United States. That's in our U.S. Constitution. You had bills signed into Congress that signed into law dating back to 1789. The Tariff Act signed by First President George Washington that would have imposed 5% tariffs. And that had a lot to do with mercantile textiles that were coming in from England into the United States that were harming the American citizens. We also have the creation of the Coast Guard itself for the purpose of what would be called cutting revenue. And part of their, they would have called their boats cutters, because the idea was that they were cutting revenue, and they were called revenue cutters, to prevent people from illegally bringing things into the country and selling them without having to pay a tariff. So it goes back to our founding. And then some key statistics here about since we have up until the early 1900s brought in a lot of our revenue via tariffs. The mark that comes from that is, I want to get to these statistics here, is from 1792 to 1812, tariffs were around 12.5% of all the United States government revenues. After the War of 1812, tariffs went up to 25%. And by 1820, tariffs were at 40%. At 1860, they were at 60%. And then coming down into right at the time of the Civil War, 90% of the federal government's revenues came from tariffs. So that's how we funded our country. And then you have President Lincoln putting on the income tax for a short time to be able to fund the Union. And I want to go back to this. Something Thomas Jefferson wrote in April 6, 1816. A lot of people are dogging Trump and saying, "Oh, how dare he put these? It's going to harm the American citizen. And this is what Thomas Jefferson said. It's eerie similar to what Trump and his Treasury Secretary have been saying lately. This is Thomas Jefferson's quote. He says, "It may be the duty of all to submit to this sacrifice, to pay for a time an impost on the importation of certain articles in order to encourage their manufacturing at home." So this is the foundation of. It's a little higher if you want to go up there, or lower, I should say. Um, to It's right above that point. Yeah, right there. That's a quote right here that Thomas Jefferson says here. And so we're seeing this is the foundation, and this goes back to kind of what we talked about. Chuck prophesied it in his Passover prophecies of the Isaiah 26:3, where we need to get back to having the imagination of the Lord. And this is the imagination that the founding fathers would have had, an understanding of how to deal with, free trade and or fair trade. So we have that playing out. It's a foundational thing. It has brought up to 90% of the revenue. But then lastly is, I want to get to this point, and this is kind of the contentious battle of things that are playing out here, is if you go down a little further keep going down a little further past the FDR stuff. There's a portion in there that I think we have to, where it talks about to avoid, keep going down one more, a little bit more, to right here, go up. It says there, to avoid FDR's taxes, because FDR would have put on income taxes, many business owners, and this is why businesses went overseas. They wanted to avoid higher taxes. They wanted to avoid the higher rate of labor and less government regulations and fewer lawsuits. So in all of this, I mentioned it briefly last week, just based off my own studies throughout the past years and in school and in debates and things, is when these companies come back, they're going to have to deal with a couple things. Obviously, the regulations that are going to have to be torn down. There's going to have to be some, and now the debate's going to have to start shifting, and maybe this is part of the new beachhead of minimum wage laws, and then unionizations. Obviously, you have some right to work states that can help with that, but people have to understand why you need that. And yes, unions in the past have been beneficial, but when they go too far and they gain too much power, it can cause a lot of problems. And ultimately, the problem that they create is that if labor costs come so high, if they were to sell it to the market, they can't compete with outside forces and or another company who's going to do it for cheaper. And so it's going to, whether that be domestically or internationally, it's going to cause some problems there. So workers may say, yeah, I want to get paid higher and all this stuff. With the advent of AI and robotics, we'll put this link here in the chats on both YouTube and Rumble here. These are the debates that are coming. And with the mechanization of a lot of things, even going back to why tariffs were implemented. And even in this article, if you read it, it talks about with the mechanization of a lot of things to be able to bring plumbing indoors, help farmers, and lower the cost of wages of workers, getting out of the slave trade, getting there, etc. It has brought about a revolution, industrialize. And so there's a lot of things that are going to have to be played out here. And the key points here are, again, that this is foundational to America. This is how we started. This is how we became so economically successful and a powerhouse. And then that shift and started with Woodrow Wilson in 1913. And then it's been a back and forth ever since then. And if you know anything about Woodrow Wilson, some claim to be one of the worst president. And obviously Biden and Jimmy Carter and Obama are trying to battle it out with him. But they say, Woodrow Wilson was the father of a lot of the downfall of America with some of the policies he put in place and some of the things he did. So a lot of this is going back to this reversal of the foundations that America was built upon. And I think to the point of getting rid of income tax on people who make over or anything under 150,000, that would revolutionize. That's that's like 70, if I remember correctly, that's like 75% of all Americans. So I mean, you have a huge, it may be more. I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's huge, and that would shift things. And if you go back to if I believe it was FDR, if I remember correctly, and the New Deal, the whole purpose of the New Deal was in order to get huge segments of the population to never leave the Democratic Party. And but they're being awakened to that. They're beginning to realize that, obviously, the last couple of years, and Trump's been a big force in that. But also at the same time, is we need to, again, we said it last week, is we need to make sure, even though Trump is right about these issues
Right.
and some other issues, we need to make sure he stays humble so he can navigate this. Because I think what Chuck's saying is we're seeing another battlefront come to play.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
and obviously, when you think of Beachhead, it's only the beginning of the next battle. Now it's the turn of the war, if you remember back to World War II. But this is a new war. We have to make sure that, what we're entering into, that we stay the course and we don't give up. Because there were many times where if America and the Allied forces would have given up, Germans would have continued to advance, and more so that spirit would have come in. So this is key for us to understand this battle around tariffs.
Right.
Everyone is just crying, they're horrible, they're horrible, they're horrible. You go back to the Victor Davis Hanson quote of, look, the rest of the world loves them. Why do we have to hate them? And they're funding their governments this way. So I think it's something to take note of.
And Chuck said, he said, stay the course. I think this is something that I think President Trump needs to hear as a father of our nation. One of the fathers, I should say, right now. I'm not calling him the father of our nation. I'm just saying he's like a father right now. Is that his heart for the apostolic? And I said this I was on the prayer call last week. One of the things that we shared last week, he's in the long game. Most presidents, when they do things like this, they have a 4-year plan or a 3-year plan, because they don't know if they're going to be in office after that time. So they want to have a legacy for it happen during their time. He's setting up precedents here that will last a long term for our children's children. It's a long game, and we want to pray into that. We want to stay the course. Over 130 countries now are in negotiations with us on the tariffs. It's the art of the deal. I understand his book now is a top seller on the New York Times list again, because people are like, well, what is he doing? What is he doing? He's written it out. It's in his book. I haven't read it, but they say it's in his book on exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, I've read it. It is.
You can't focus on what he's saying. Okay, tariffs. It's the backstory, which is, okay, this is what the tariffs are going to produce. It's going to bring them to the table, and they're going to start negotiating, which is happening. And China is not finding any partners. They went to the EU. They've gone to other countries in the Middle East. They say, hey, fight with us against America. And these countries are saying no, because everybody is a slave to China right now. The world is a slave to China. I'm talking about the government, not the people, because I believe God's going to do a great outpouring of his spirit in China. But I believe for the government, they're not finding partnership. We got to pray that continues, that they will not find partnership with anybody in the world, and that this would be a fair trade for all of us, that we just want a level field here. And for manufacturers, I watched Trapper on CNN trying to corner a manufacturer in Maryland about how bad these tariffs were and how it's hurting him. And the guy just kept, just positively speaking about how his business is improving. He held up this metal cage that he produces. I can't forget what it's for. It costs like $1 or something. He said, but when I ship it to China or ship it to another country, they pay $134 for it because of all the tariffs that get added to it. And he said, it's killing my business in foreign countries. Yeah. He said, yeah, I can sell it there to America, but I can't sell it overseas because it's not fair. And the CNN reporter, he was dying because it was not working the way he wanted it to. And he didn't get to go down the narrative road that he wanted to go down. And I think that's something that we're seeing right now of what's happening. And I think Trump is suing. I was going to play a clip. I won't have time today of him suing CBS and all the things about their fake news. It's time that they face the consequences of misleading the people with their narratives. And the FCC, which is free air. Now, when you're a cable company or you're private like us, well, I shouldn't say it does affect us. Anybody that has free air time has to abide by certain rules. And you're not allowed to bend a story to make a narrative, basically, that's dangerous. And so he has a good case. They're in negotiations because he's suing for billions, and they're actually trying to settle out of court because they know they're wrong. But we need more of this, where they're actually having to be held accountable for what they're doing in this place. And on the last thing on the tariffs was, I think the computer industry is where we're so dependent upon Israel. I mean, not Israel, but upon China for. Now, there are companies that are in America right now. I was reading an article in Arizona and other places. They're going to build the chips and semiconductors and all that. We're probably 12 to 15 months away from mass production. So that's why we got to stay this course. So there may be some bumps in the road for the next year, concerning this. But if we wage the war properly, we will lose dependence upon other nations to produce everything that we need to produce, especially in that area. And I think that's very important. And I think that's a long game that President Trump is playing. And we were talking about before we came on the air, a lot of conservative pundits, right wingers, the Giulianis and things like that, that are really upset with Bondi and Kash Patel and all this stuff of what they're doing and not moving fast enough. But this is a long game. And Bondi has said it, and Kash Patel said it, that if they don't build a case properly, then what's going to happen when they go to court? They're going to lose, and the liberals will gain even more territory by doing this. So they're making sure all their all their I's are dotted and their T's are crossed, so that they make sure when they're going. Because Giuliani was a classic case of somebody who he ruined everything President Trump was trying to do, because he would go to court without precedents and start fighting in Arizona, and he had no precedents there. He'd go somewhere else. And all those lawyers that were around Trump during the first 2020 around there, they were making huge mistakes because the right wing was saying, go to court, fight, 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 fight. And Bondi and Kash Patel are more brilliant than that. And they're making a wiser decision to make sure that when we go in, we have a great chance to win. I can say that lobbying. When I worked with APAC, when I was lobbying for them, we never, one time in all my 10 years of lobbying with them, ever took a case to the floor that we didn't think we could win, because we didn't want to waste our time and all our energy and our finances if we knew we weren't going to win. There was one time we did on principle on the Iran nuclear deal, but the rest of the time we made sure, and if we couldn't have a chance to win, we didn't bring it to the floor. The Congress didn't. And I think that's where I think we have to be wise in this and be patient, stay the course. I know Zach, you had a little bit on that before we close.
Yeah, and going back to the news stuff is, in a spiritual sense, they're like watchmen. They're meant to call out balls and strikes to a degree and kind of highlight things to the people so they know, what's coming, what's there. And Chuck's pointed this out over the years. They haven't been doing that. And so there's a day of reckoning for them, a judgment coming on them, to where they've called to, when they look at certain subjects, they need to vet them and look through them and be middle line objective about the topic, not put their own agenda and or their own opinion. And if they do put their own opinion, to state their own opinion, which is why the Daily Wires, Blaze, and all these other, new networks and Newsmax and all this stuff are doing so well, is because they're saying, look, they're being honest with their pundits and more so their people who are their viewers, and saying, look, we have a right-wing bias and here's how we look at the news. And because obviously we know everybody else they're left wing, even though they're saying they're middle and they're going to be objective, and they're not. And so that's kind of calling it out there. And so that's one of the key things there, and something we have to look to, thinking long term. Hitting on that point is we have to now start looking of, China's looking at these computer chips and all this tariff stuff. Is Taiwan is the key one. When Biden was president, there was the threat of them, attacking Taiwan. But this is where Taiwan is where a lot of the chips for Apple and all these Intel chips and computer chips are being made. So that's kind of something to pay attention to and watch out for as we move forward in the days ahead. Because if China's going to realize, okay, we need these back, there could possibly, if their military is as strong as they believe they are, going to possibly go in and try to take Taiwan. What does that mean now that a lot of the U.S. vessels and ships are in the Middle East? So something to pay attention to there. And then it's going to take some time to bring, as we see here, 12 to 15 months to bring these things stateside. But then when they come stateside, what do labor laws come into effect? What do wages come into effect? How do unions come into effect? All this red tape of policies that needs to be kind of broken down on the state level. So something for each state to look at to possibly bring business there. Obviously, in our opinion, my opinion, red states will do better than blue states. And so something we have to think of. But then also after that is we have to start looking and praying for the future leaders. Is can they pay attention? Can they be humble in these seasons? Because that's one of the things we saw with some of this last election, the potential president candidates, is a lot of them were hardened on their quote unquote policies that they believed in. They weren't able to pinpoint and navigate off that. And if a lot of people fault Trump for being able to switch policies and move back and forth, is to a degree he's not afraid of admitting when he's wrong and shifting. And that's kind of the imagination you have to be able to do. And that's more of a business mindset. That's an entrepreneurial mindset that he has had. And I think that's why he's been so successful as he has, one in business, but then also as a leader for the United States, to understand, look, we can't sit here and let a failing operation continue to move forward. We have to pivot from it, get rid of those who are kind of stampeding, and move forward to a place where we can start gaining some traction and momentum and to see what actually works to get out of debt. And Elon Musk points this out. It's like, if we don't get out of debt now, we're going to be in trouble. And obviously this goes back to the 80s, where it's a war of superpowers with China and the United States. And so the United States has to make a decision. And I think Jefferson's quote is right, is we have a duty to kind of pay the price now so that we can leave inheritance for our children's children. And
That's
I know
right.
we've talked about it before. I've heard for years you say that, but I think it's like more Americans are now realizing why that is. And now that there's a real threat with China and even possibly with Iran, and that agenda as well, is, look, there's a time to have to do this. We're at the precipice where there needs to be somebody needs to take a stand.
Yep.
And Gen X and the millennials, more so Gen X, the older millennials or younger millennials, I should say, they're realizing this, and Gen Z, these younger Gen Alpha, Gen Z, Beta, that they're calling, the new babies that are being born now, this is going to be their battle. They're going to have to stand it up to fight this stuff, to overcome this, and to hold the ground as well and not give up.
And that's why on the backside, Trump is doing the negotiations for rare earth materials in Ukraine and also in Africa and other places where he's making these deals. It is amazing because he knows we've got to break our dependence. And for me, prophetically, for China, because the Lord has spoken to us about the move of God there, there has to be a change that goes on there for the church to thrive even greater than it is now, and to be a place where the gospel continues to go out of there from all the way to Jerusalem. And so this is a way of crippling that terrorist, not terrorist, but just the repressive group that is running the people's lives there, and give them a place of freedom for the rest of the world. Okay. Well, as we close, don't forget the 50 days. We're going to pray into that, the counting of the omers, we call it. In essence, what that represents is the scriptures around counting the omer. It's in Leviticus 23 and Deuteronomy 16. But it's a framework for spiritual preparation, for anticipation, and thanksgiving, because it leads you toward a breakthrough, the Feast of Shavuot, the Feast of Pentecost, which is it's an ongoing revelation of God's will as we keep moving forward. It's a promised breakthrough, and Chuck gave us the where we played it first. Chuck Pierce did, about the 50 days that we're in. So let's press into that. Thanks for listening today. Remind me, we'll be back here tomorrow at noon, and then Wednesday at 6:30, and then this Sunday will be our service for the last of the feast, the unleavened bread and first fruits. We did a first fruit message, not this Sunday, but the Sunday before. Encourage you to go listen to that. You can go to our YouTube channel as well. Type in first fruits, and we have many sermons there on that. We have other speakers besides myself speaking about it. A great revelation. I tried to bring it out yesterday, that how Passover and first fruits are tied together, of giving our best, because God has delivered us and brought us into a new territory. All right. God bless you. We love you. We'll see you next Monday here at 12 noon Central Time. Bye-bye.